In this lesson, you'll learn more about automatic thoughts. First, we'll hear from Dr. Aaron Beck about how he developed his theory of automatic thoughts. Next, our clinicians will describe key features of automatic thoughts. Then we'll discuss the kinds of situations in which clients have automatic thoughts, how automatic thoughts are related to specific emotions, and how automatic thoughts can be confused with emotions or vice versa. Finally, Dr. Beck will tell us about the importance of identifying key cognitions that characterize the various disorders.
So I was seeing patients 2 or 3, 4 times a week, and they're on the couch and free associating. And then one time I had an unusual experience. For me, it was unusual. And that one of the women patients that I was seeing started to regale me with all kinds of stories about his sexual escapades and so on. And she continued on through the entire session doing all that. And at the end of the session, I asked her, "Now, how do you feel?" And she said, "Well, doctor, I feel quite anxious." And so I gave her a good psychoanalytic formulation. And I said, "Well, you see, the big problem is in talking about sex, it triggers anxiety because you consider that sex is somehow unacceptable, and it then triggers anxiety and some kind of fear of disapproval from me or from society, maybe from your parents." And she said, "Yes, doctor, that makes very good sense. But," and I said, "Well, what's the but?" Thinking she was going to show a resistance now. And she said, "Well, actually, what I was really thinking about was that I was boring you." And I said, "What?" And I said, "Well, how many times did you have that thought?" And she said, "Well, I was thinking this all through the session." And I said, "Oh, well, that's interesting. Do you ever have these thoughts any other times?" And she says, "Well, I always have it, and I'm always anxious that I'm boring people." So then another light went off in my head, and I started to think, this seems to be totally contradictory to the way I was thinking, because what she is doing is she's reporting having some thoughts that don't fit into my theory, and it's these thoughts themselves that seem to be stirring up the anxiety, not the sexual material, but it's these thoughts, and the thoughts have to do with self-critical thoughts. So then I started to ask other patients during the session what thoughts they were having during the session, and it turned out that they were having same type of negative self-deprecatory thoughts. And after having seen this in a number of patients, it occurred to me that there's a whole stream of kind of preconscious thinking that goes on that people don't generally report to the analyst, or at least they weren't reporting it to me, and that these thoughts that they were having had to do with some kind of an internal communication system, not the kind of things that one reports to other people, but the kind of automatic thoughts that one has, such as when you're driving, you have an automatic thought, there's a bump in the road, I'll steer around it. These thoughts happen automatically, and they're not only very quick, but they go away very quickly, and people don't pay too much attention to them. But even though they don't pay much attention to them, they can trigger all kinds of emotions: anger, euphoria, sadness, and so on. So now I was getting another piece of material from my patients. And at that point, and this has to do with the therapy part, at that point I decided that instead of having them on the couch, I would sit my patients up, and we would kind of focus on things in general, but also on automatic thoughts.
Now we'll join the Beck Institute clinicians for a roundtable discussion about automatic thoughts. What's important to know about automatic thoughts?
Well, I think just in the name automatic thoughts, whenever I talk about them with my clients, I say they just arise spontaneously without us even trying to think about them. And that's why they're called automatic. So you may have a therapist watching this roundtable right now, and even though they're paying attention to what we're saying, a thought may pop up in their mind I'll never understand this. So even when we're trying to think about something, they just show up automatically.
The automatic thoughts, they're brief, they're fleeting, they're unquestionable, and they can come in such brief moments. There's a patient I saw yesterday who, in describing when he was faced with studying for his exams, he had the thought, oh no. That was his automatic thought.
What did oh no mean to him?
It was in a telegraphic form. It was like a shorthand form that oh no at that point meant I am out of control. I have no control. And that seemed so unquestionable at that moment. That seemed so much part of his reality that he would stop right then and there.
It was so extremely brief.
And so extremely brief, but it reflected a belief that was so reflective of what stopped him from doing his work, that he had no control over himself, that when he was able to question that automatic thought, when he was able to question the validity of it, it enabled him to see choices and to see freedom that he had not seen before. But it started off with really just those words, oh no, and what that word meant, or what those words meant at that point.
I would add that it's important to teach our clients that we have thousands of automatic thoughts per day that we're largely unaware of. And mostly what our clients are aware of are the emotional, behavioral, and physiological sensations that follow those thoughts, or precede those thoughts, but they're not aware of the thoughts themselves.
And I think given that we have so many of these automatic thoughts per day, for therapists, it can be really powerful to catch automatic thoughts of their clients in session. So to catch them in session when that emotion's high as well. So I can think of a client of mine who we're talking about her homework, which was walking your dog every day. And she's talking about her dog and her face just lights up. And then all of a sudden, her shoulders drop, her head's down, and she just starts crying. So that was a perfect opportunity for me to say, what's going through your mind right now? And she said, I just don't know what I'll do when I lose my dog. When he dies, I'm going to be completely alone. Yeah. So that was just a really great opportunity to take a look at that thought.
So again, you noticed an affect shift, and that prompted you to ask for the thoughts.
Yeah, exactly.
And in so doing, you're beginning to teach her how to notice her thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, in some ways, it's said that the purpose of therapy is making the unconscious conscious, and in asking our patients for their automatic thoughts, or having them attend to something that before they may not have been aware of.
And when you asked her, Rob, what was going through her mind right now, it reminded me that some clients aren't really able to give us a thought, but they can give us an image. So sometimes automatic thoughts are more like images to our clients. And that's very important to know as well.
Anyone think of an image that one of your clients had?
I had a depressed client who he was in college, he wasn't doing well, and his image was him as a 40-year-old on his parents' couch because he was not going to make anything of himself.
These images can be really powerful and
Yeah.
also incredibly quick, and yet have a very profound impact on how the person is feeling.
And I think with the types of thoughts as well, we tend to make certain cognitive errors pretty consistently. Like an example would be catastrophizing or predicting the worst case scenario.
And that's what your client was doing, right?
Yep, exactly.
The worst case scenario, age 40 on his parents' couch.
Oh, definitely. And I can think of too how this happens a lot with anxiety, especially generalized anxiety, and predicting the future. So I had a client who she was going on vacation with her family, and the first prediction was the plane's going to crash. So I said, okay, let's say the plane makes it. What happens next? She said, well, the rental car is just going to break down, and we're going to be in the middle of nowhere, and a drifter's going to come by and kill us. So I said,
I wonder if she had an image of that too.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Wow.
yeah.
Pretty powerful. These
So if we listen carefully, sometimes we can hear that the thoughts or images come in a theme. And I'm working with a client now who's looking for a job. And when we talk about what's getting in the way of her doing the task that she said the week before that she would do in order to look for a job, There are interfering thoughts that sound like, they're going to reject me. I don't have what it takes for that job. I know they're asking for 5 years of experience and I have 4 3/4, so I'm not going to apply. And so if you can hear that those thoughts are sort of like a cluster of, I'm not good enough.
And in that moment, she really, really believes them.
Yes.
And at that moment, they guide her actions.
Yes. Yes.
Now we'll talk about the kinds of situations that you may have automatic thoughts in or about. The situation might be what you're experiencing right at the moment, or it could be a past experience, such as walking into work or getting ready to go out. Or automatic thoughts can be about reflections on a past situation or predictions about a future situation. In other words, the situation may be thinking about what my coworker said or thinking about what my sister might say. Okay, as we discussed before, you may be having automatic thoughts about any part of the cognitive model, including internal experiences such as pain, racing or obsessive thoughts, flashbacks, or emotional or physiological reactions. Next, you need to know that your emotions are logically connected with the thoughts that you've just had. If you have a thought such as, I won't be able to see my friend for a long time, you'll probably feel sad. If you think, what if I lose my job, you'll probably feel anxious. If you think, how dare that driver cut out in front of me, you'll probably feel angry. In addition, you might mix up your thoughts with your emotions. Emotions are usually expressed in just one word, such as happy or sad. Automatic thoughts are expressed in at least a few words. But sometimes clients give you automatic thoughts when you ask them how they feel. They might say, for example, I feel like she doesn't really want to see me. She doesn't want to see me is an automatic thought. The client's emotion is sadness. You don't have to correct clients outright, though. You can just summarize and ask another question. So when you had the thought, she doesn't want to see me, how did you feel emotionally? Happy, sad, anxious, angry? It's important for you to learn to recognize the key cognitions for each of the different disorders. In depression, for example, we focus on the automatic thoughts that have to do with the self, the world and other people, and the future. If you focus on those thoughts when you're treating panic disorder, though, your client is unlikely to get better. In panic disorder, the key cognition is the catastrophe the client is afraid will happen if a certain sensation or set of sensations gets worse and worse and worse. For example, my chest feels tight, I'm having trouble breathing, it means I'm having a heart attack. In the next video, Dr. Aaron Beck emphasizes the importance of identifying the cognitions that characterize different disorders.
Now, the generic cognitive model is kind of a template. And given this template, one can look for specific features across any of the disorders and then look at what's actually specific for a given disorder. And many times when I've done a workshop, people would say, well, do I have to learn something new for each of the disorders? Or is there some easier way of going about it? And my answer to that is that there is this generic cognitive model which runs across all of the disorders. But there's one difference for each of the disorders which can account for the disorder, and that is the meanings that the patients attribute to their experiences. And the meanings have to do with the beliefs that the people have. So the disorders are similar in many ways, but they're differentiated by the specific beliefs that the people have.